This conference will now be recorded.
There you go.
Well, good evening, friends. Thanks so much for joining us for our conversation, Caring for Our Families, with Dr. Jonathan Gerkin. He's a UNC psychiatrist and also a member of our Newman Catholic community. My name is Matthew Irwin. I'm the pastoral associate for catechesis here at the Newman Catholic community at UNC Chapel Hill. Johnny, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So you and your family are important members of our community. I like having coffee with you every Sunday morning while your kids are upstairs at catechesis and reading the gospel together. But tell us a little bit about your professional experience and what you do here on campus.
So I'm a psychiatrist. I've been at UNC training now trained the first 4 years there, and then been working there mostly for the last 10 years or so, doing consultation to the medical units. So when folks are in the medical hospital, either for surgery or what have you, they'll call and they want consultation from psychiatrists. Most of my work with kids and families was probably focused in my training, but I have found that all of us have an inner adolescent, and all of us can relate to our family more effectively with presence. And of course, I have some young kids of my own, and they're probably the biggest challenge to my therapeutic skills.
There you go.
So hopefully we can talk about those things and give some guidance.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here, and thanks to our parents who are here tonight or who are going to be listening in and join the conversation later. Why don't we begin in prayer?
Sure.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, we thank you for these parents that you've gathered tonight. We thank you for the father's heart and mother's heart that you've put in each of us for our kids, for our desire to love and shelter and protect and guide and heal and help them. God, we pray that through this experience of living out our parenthood, we might know you even more and your Father's heart and your great love and mercy for us, especially in this moment where so many are in great need in our families and communities and throughout the world. We pray that you bless and guide our conversation tonight and help us to learn from one another and to encourage one another. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Yeah.
Well, John, you mentioned your kids. Tell us about your family. What's your guys' situation with work and school, and how are you guys doing?
Yeah, so we're very fortunate. My wife is a social worker therapist, and works in our department as well. And she works mainly in the home. She is 1 day a week taking care of patients, and the rest of the time she's taking care of our home and our kids. Our oldest son is 6.5, and he's in kindergarten. Well, was in kindergarten. I think he's probably done with kindergarten now for the year. And our youngest is 4.5, and he is in daycare, preschool/daycare. And even though they're still open, we're probably deciding to have him stay home at least for the near future. And so we're lucky. Of course, her sanity, will be more tested. As Matt knows, we took some time. I had a sabbatical in late 2018 and early 2019, and so I actually worked a lot harder during my sabbatical because I was doing a lot more family and child sort of, care, and helped me to realize how challenging that is. And so, but we are lucky that she can do that. We have her mother-in-law in town as well, but she's 71, and so we're really, limiting her exposure to the kids for now if we can.
Okay. Yeah. So I have a bunch of little kids at home too. One of the first conversations in this last, I don't know, time's a blur now, week, 10 days is like, how and when is this news is breaking, involving, how do I have that initial conversation with my kids? And how do I have this like ongoing conversation? What did that look like in your family?
Yeah, so being at the hospital, and some of my work is with infectious disease doctors. I work in a clinic that works with the population that has a lot of infectious diseases and HIV and this sort of thing. And I've been talking with them over time. And so my wife and I would decide to talk about it at dinner time or other times where the whole family's together, and just sort of like what I would say unloaded way. It's not around sort of why we can't do this or why we can't do that. It's more of a, hey, there's something going on. There's this, a virus. We just use the word that is being used, and we have talked about COVID, and we've talked about coronavirus, and just let them know that it's going to cause us to change what we're doing, and then we kind of from there, as opportunities arise, again, hopefully not usually when we're like keeping them from doing something, although it does come out then, but hopefully before that, we've sprinkled it in. And it's hard not to harp on them about washing their hands and not touching their face and this sort of thing, but what we've tried to do is really reward them for doing those things. And we use a sticker chart. It's not like a formal, like, you get a sticker for doing this. It's more like anything that is them, voluntarily or with minimal encouragement doing important things. And so when they get 35 stickers on their piece of paper that they put their name on, then they get a little surprise. And I mean, it's usually, a really small thing, but to them, they don't, whatever it is, they like it. So we've been using that approach for this as well.
I love that. I love the just talking about in simple terms to what's actually going on with coronavirus. I loved hearing my 3-year-old in the other room this morning asking mommy, when the virus is all gone, can we? I forget where she was wanting to go, but that's it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think as long as you're talking about it, like, again, in pieces, then now when the times come where it's more important for them to alter their behavior, they're not surprised, they're not scared. It's familiar. We learn through familiarity, whether we like that or not.
I found 2 kind of conversations, one with my 6-year-old, one with my 11-year-old, kind of helpful. I could tell my 11-year-old was a little anxious, and I don't know if that's because just where he was at or because maybe the way I dove into the conversation or tended to his question. But somebody suggested online, hey, just let's focus on, like, look how cool this is that we're all working together. Just that kind of proactive spirit that really helped to diffuse, like, it's true, there's a lot going on, but we're all working together to keep everybody safe, kind of thing. And that was kind of so it worked really well with him, and it was a go-to the next morning when my 6-year-old, I almost said goodbye and walked out the door. Then I realized, she's asking me something, but she hasn't quite put it in words yet. And then she was able to kind of get it out, like, well, why are you going to work? I thought we're supposed to stay home because of this virus. So then we could talk about some of the things we've done here at our office building, and I'm in isolation and I'm safer and cleaner, and thank her for her concern. But yeah,
that's exactly right. I think slowing down and even just physically getting down and lower and face to face with your kids and giving them time to formulate whatever it is. And our boys will say, I forgot my word, this sort of thing sometimes. And so you just kind of hang with it. But yeah, I think giving them an idea as to how we're protecting ourselves, when we're not exactly doing the black or white thing of staying completely isolated. I'm sure you're doing like we are at work, which is really limiting our close contact and working, by telephone and computer, and like we are with this webinar as much as possible. And
well, Johnny, I wonder if we could invite any of our moms and dads who are there, if you want to, through the chat box, or if you just want to unmute yourself and ask a question here about talking to your kids, or if you want to share with us how that went talking to your kids this last week about things. One of the things that I've been thinking about in the recent days is like, hey, we're being real intentional about talking to our kids. How do I not forget myself and my spouse in that mix? That, like, I have thoughts and feelings and she does too, and they're going to change from day to day and decision to decision. And we're going to have healthier moments and more of those like freak out moments. So how do you manage that in your house, or what's your recommendation there?
Yeah, so I had mentioned to you that I practice mindfulness and a type of psychotherapy that's based in mindfulness and acceptance. And it doesn't always work in the most emotionally loaded situations. But the idea is to get intentional, like you said, and you really want to focus mostly on what you can control. And when you find your mind really going to things that you can't control, practicing noticing that, and sometimes you won't notice it. Like 15 minutes will go by, and you'll be like, it might occur to you like, I've just been obsessing this entire time, or I've just been looking at, the latest news all this time. And when you notice that, that's generally not a helpful strategy to help you with, worries or thoughts that are out of your control. And so it doesn't mean that you shouldn't, read about it, but you should probably set aside a little bit of time to do that. That works for you, from trusted sources, and then, let that be the rest of the day. And then what you're going to want to do when you are feeling overwhelmed is to ground yourself, and that could be through prayer, conversation, or mindfulness practices. And then from there, you also want to be intentional about, okay, so now I can notice when I'm getting carried away, and I have some idea of how to ground myself to step out of that. Now what am I going to do? And it's not an easy, there's no easy answer for this. But if we just slow down, then we think, okay, what's important to me? What are my values? And for most of us, Christian values are kind of the easy go-to. It's what we've known and can sort of bring out at any moment. And just like, well, being that as my guide in this situation where there are certain limitations, how do I want to live that? And just very sort of, really, it might seem mundane or even I don't know, too concrete, but getting intentional about what your routine is going to be like. And so for me, I work at the hospital, and so I've gone from showering in the morning to showering when I get home from work. And I'm wearing like scrubs and stuff now, where usually I didn't, and those go in the laundry, and I try to get home a little earlier, and then I take my quick shower, and then I try to give my wife some time. She really likes to cook, so she can do that. And then I'm spending, an hour or so catching up with the kids the best I can. We try to get outside, but not too close to our neighbors, but we might talk to them still, over the fence or what have you. And then what she's working on is, the teachers have sent activities. And so what we talked about with the kids today was, we're going to, build in an hour of learning time. And, it will probably be a challenge, but each day trying to build upon that while keeping in mind what it is to take care of ourselves. And so that's sort of what I would say is like the general guidance. And then I mentioned to you, I have a couple of resources that I want to share. One is more general about managing stress and anxiety in uncertain times. And then one is really concrete, and it makes sort of this abstract stuff that I'm talking about, this mindfulness and acceptance, more concrete. It's got a mnemonic, which some people, I used to always hate mnemonics because I now realize I only ever used them when I was trying to learn things I didn't want to learn. But now using them for things I actually care about, it works. And so there's this mnemonic that sort of helps you to do these kind of steps that I'm talking about. And again, it may feel silly on the face of it, but notice that, and then see if you can personalize it to work for you. Is just sort of what I would think about, because these kind of guides are not going to tell you like, what should I have my kids do at 3 p.m. But what they will be able to do is to have you be present enough to be able to make those kinds of plans and then enact them, and not get too caught up in the distraction, and stay present and be with them.
Yeah. As you're sharing, a number of times here, I just resonate with, like, and we've talked about this even on Sunday morning with coffee, like, like the regular struggles of parenting and disciplining, for example. Right. And, this idea of we got to get low and slow and listen. Yep. And so I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about our experience upstairs as catechists in the atrium. And one of the things that, like, we've been formed in this Catechismus of the Good Shepherd is that our youngest children receive the deepest, most profound, important truths. And it's like a rosebud that just opens up the rest of life. But what was most important was received in the earliest season. And so like this idea of like low and slow and listen, like we're just literally applying that in all of these different moments and different circumstances. And I share that because it's like a reminder. Lauren's asking us here, she's just recently pulling the kids out of daycare and school and stuff, and realizing that it's gonna get harder in the next few weeks as people we know get sick, and or maybe even just as simple as cabin fever. And it's just such a reminder that like the deepest, most simple things come first. And so now's the moment that we fall back on those good practices we've already had, or if we don't have good practices and routines, now's the point to start practicing and applying, because there probably are going to be more difficult days ahead of us.
Yeah, and I would say if you haven't been doing much of this kind of thing, this is a nice opportunity. And then also, even though your mind will tell you the learning curve is very steep, the good news is that the sort of growth at the beginning of these kinds of things is tremendous, and you can see a big difference quickly just by slowing down. Which again, there's an opportunity here because we aren't going and doing 1,000 things right now. We're not taking our kids to 17 practices in 6 different locations and dropping them here and picking them up there and doctor's appointment, this and that. Hopefully, generally pediatricians aren't going to be wanting you to bring your kids in unless it's very serious, and ourselves, we're not going to want to be going into healthcare settings, and so there's this opportunity to slow down and watch when your child is. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but my 4-year-old is yelling downstairs right now. And luckily Elizabeth, my wife, is not yelling back at him, but what we've really been trying to do is we just kind of stay with it and watch it pass, pick our battles. This is probably well beneath the people listening right now, but we tried to get on the same page with an approach called love and logic. I don't know if you're familiar with that, Matt, or not, but the essential premise there is sort of what we're talking about, which is the biggest thing is to maintain your sort of emotional stability the best you can. And then it gives you lots of tricks of how to do this, and coming up with a tag phrase when there's something that you can't let pass, like a uh-oh, or a oh bummer, or this sort of thing. And then if you do that, you train them that just by saying that, it's now time for them to begin to change their behavior. And then if you have to move forward to, and it recommends removal from the situation. If you have to move to that, then you're actually supposed to sing a song to a familiar melody while doing that to keep yourself from becoming angry, outwardly angry. And because what you're trying to convey is that it's sad that they're having a consequence, and then to your best ability, you're trying to have them have a natural consequence. Well, we have boys, so the only consequence for them is removal of our attention. They want to be the center of attention at all times, and so it's a challenge when they're younger. I think it gets easier when they're older, but it's the same stuff we were doing before this coronavirus. It's just now we have a little more time to practice it and get on the same page. So,
well, let me ask you there. So Lauren, this makes me think. Lauren asked here, any advice for working at home with your spouse and 3 kids? And the reason why I jump in there with that question is, it sounds great, but the reality is we were like running around like, hey, boss, what am I doing next week? And I got to go to the store because people are crazy and buying all the toilet paper. And so we probably sat down for the first day where one or both of us were working remotely and the kids are home, and we probably didn't have any intentional conversation on the front end. So what advice do you have about now we've jumped in and made a mess, we've observed, we're going to make some changes. How do we have that intentional conversation with our spouse, our partner, and then with the kids?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, it varies by the age of your kids, obviously, but with your spouse, you know sort of what works with them probably over time. And you just want to take some time, maybe it's right after the kids go to bed or are off doing their own thing, depending on their age, and just check in on it. Like, how do you want to approach this? And you may have a spouse who says, I trust you, you make the decisions, or maybe someone who really wants to work with you on it. But you're right, you have to start having a conversation, and then you want to use these same skills to stay present in that conversation, because things may be said that, the tone is, emotional, or the content causes us to feel, real feelings, righteous feelings. The goal, though, is to stay with it and be effective in coming to some shared decision. And probably one of the biggest things is to not try to solve it all from the beginning, because that's insurmountable. And so you just want to chip away at it, and you want to start with, well, what do we want to do tomorrow? And then, what time tomorrow should we talk again to figure out what we're going to do the next day? And then after you get a little ways into it, now you start to build a routine over time. Because if you set yourself up to set an elaborate plan, and this is what we're going to do, that's you're destined to probably have failure, which is going to lead to some despair, which will cause potentially more sort of, acting out, or just, feeling more anxious, more despair, more hopeless. So the idea, like you're saying, is to open and have a conversation, doing your best to stay grounded, and pick small goals. And your family, and that's the good news here. Like we know each other, and we know what pushes each other's buttons, and you can do your best to step out of that, and make small pieces. One thing I do want to add is, your boss is not nearby, and there's, I can't remember the name of the person, but there's a decent movement in business where people shouldn't really try to work more than 90 minutes straight without taking a break. And so, and it's like a 20-minute break that you should take. And so what you might want to consider doing is working with your spouse around, okay, I'm going to take this 90 minutes, you're doing this for that amount of time, then I'm going to take a brief break. You might be a little longer, than you'll work, and then I'll do it. So like figuring out how to stagger it a bit as well. And truth be told, if we're really honest, when we're at work, we're not exactly working, intensely the entire 8, or 9 hours, or whatever it is, right? And so be kind to yourself, in my opinion, around, taking breaks and sharing the responsibility. And if you get a good solid 4 hours of work in and an 8-hour day at home with a spouse and 3 kids, like I'd say you're winning. And if people are upset with that, well, you can try to grow from that, but I don't think they would notice.
Yeah, I'm reminded of our Montessori training. What Montessori teachers for decades have discovered is that there's a work cycle, huh? And their insight is that it's probably about 3 hours, but with some caveats. Like one, the first, I don't know, like almost 45 minutes to 90 minutes for some kids or some adults is literally like little busy bees or butterflies flitting around from like one thing for 5 minutes, one thing for 10, one thing for 15. And then eventually their energy does sort of go up. And if we don't intervene, and we have a healthy environment in an atrium or in our home, they usually do self-correct themselves and will often enter into their deepest work for maybe another 90 minutes and for a whole 3-hour cycle. And I've found some truth to that with our work with the kids, but also in watching myself work. It's also helpful to realize that what we've discovered is that young children probably only have one of those really good work cycles in them for the day. Older kids, maybe 2, and us as adults, we might have 3, but realize like our domestic duties are one of those work cycles too. So it's like, how do I tackle whether it's a 90-minute or a 3-hour, like one block in the morning and one really solid block in the afternoon, and have that conversation. And I'm realizing too that like there are, your children are awesome, but I don't know if this is a newsflash to you. There are some Sundays when your kids in general are a little crazier than others. And if a kid like week after week is having a little trouble, we still give them freedom, because they have dignity. They're a human being, and they need to choose. But sometimes to help them be happy and healthy, successful, we give them freedom in tighter parameters. And so that's sort of thinking through, where can you give your kids, but especially your teenagers, I think, some of the choice in making decisions to what to do and how to come up with that routine. Just like you and your spouse are going to work together, you probably need to work with your teens and older kids, and very young kids to some degree. You might tell them, this is what our schedule is going to be, our routine's going to be.
I like giving options. definitely give options.
I don't know. See, you and I both in our homes don't have teenagers. We've had a few parents say, you know, we're doing this. We're doing all the right things. We're trying to be intentional and understanding, patient, and lay out a routine. But my teenager or my college student who's home on break are now thrust back into this like 8-hour routine. They're used to their 8 hours away from this routine and these
Yeah.
rules and want to close the door or stare at a screen all day. How do we navigate that?
Yeah, I think we have to try to find a compromise, like you said. I mean, with a young child who sort of gets to a place where you have to just kind of let go a bit and let them burn through that. I think with older kids, in my opinion, you have to work at it and start at a point and go from there. And so it's going to be very specific to your situation. What my experience has been you sort of say these are the options that we're willing to support. You probably can't go teetotal and say there's no screen time or this sort of thing. You probably are going to have to bend a little more. In our home, we try to do no more than 30 minutes of screen time a day, but that's just not really feasible now. And so we've doubled it at this point, and at times it gets to 3 times the 30 minutes. And so to me, I think it's more like, here's what we're willing to do. And then now when you set the limits, it's best to see how well you can remain present when you're responding to what comes from the child, from your teenager, and work with them around that. But it's going to be a trial and error approach. And so the details of it are going to come from your immediate experience. But the most important thing, in my opinion, again, is to have some approach that allows you to stay grounded, be slow in your response. Your teenager might respond in a way that is so hostile that you can't help but feel anger, and you might want to step away, right? And then think about it, and then go back in and sort of see that as not something that you have to get too hung up upon, and continue to move forward the best you can.
Yeah. I have been surprised at us as adults and kids of different age, how well the concept of can I have a do-over works. Like we think of it as
Yeah,
such a childish preschool sort of thing. But if
yeah, I
you're
like that.
you're sincere about it, like it has
Yeah.
worked with my wife and I, it's worked with my older kids, it certainly works with the younger kids. Just let me try that again. And then in the process of trying again, I'm going to apologize for how I didn't handle it well the
Yes.
first time.
Definitely. We take those opportunities to teach our kids that even mommies and daddies lose their cool, and we have emotions, they're natural, and sometimes we act on them in ways that we regret. And then as soon as we catch that, we try to correct it, and we apologize, and we uh, learn, how to do better with that as best we can. But what we tend to do is to tell our kids like warnings, like daddy's starting to feel frustrated,
Mm.
daddy's starting to feel more upset, daddy's having some disappointment, this sort of thing. uh, Also to just teach, when you use words to describe emotions, it actually sends a really powerful signal to the emotion centers of your brain, that you don't have to act on it, and it down regulates that sort of emotion to behavior sort of short circuit.
Yeah. So this is going to be a tough period, partly because we don't know how long it's going to go on, what it's going to look like. We're going to have to be flexible. So yeah, if we have a no screens during the week or X number of minutes a day, like those things are going to change. But what are the signs for us that like, wow, their screen time has reached a limit where now we're increasing their anxiety or isolation or depression, or just in general? What are those warning signs that, yeah, we're all going to have kind of a rough time of this, but what are warning signs that like we're looking at anxiety or something I need to intervene on?
Yeah. I think if you're having multiple days of difficulty engaging in any sort of you know um, presence-based interaction with anyone else, right? Like if a person just seems to, whether it's a child or an adolescent or an adult, it's exceedingly rare in young children to see this, but adolescents and adults, if they start to really show that they don't care in a significant way, like I would prefer to see them get angry, than
Mm.
to have no response. So that's one thing to watch for. generally anxiety itself, folks can't help but express that in a pretty significant way. If it gets really powerful, um, it's hard to talk about, and so in my experience, the best thing to do is to kind of disclose what kind of emotions that you're having and what worries that you're having, and you can always sort of offer, are you having anything like this? More than likely, you're going to hear no, but that's okay, because what you're trying to do is just to convey, like, there are things that we're going to struggle with, and you're open to hear about it and to help them work through it. And more than likely, if you stay present, you are authentic, which humans are with their children generally, then it may not be that day, it may not be the next day, but there will be a time where the person says, hey, there's this little thing, and you're practicing being slow and being present, and then it comes out, right? You're not going to be able to coerce them or cajole them, in this way. It's more of a, oh, this is showing up for me and this for you. I wonder about this. They've rejected all. You don't overreact, and then it becomes something that maybe they feel more comfortable talking about over time. If you're doing that and you're seeing no response, the sleep is becoming affected, diet, this type of stuff, you want to reach out to, folks you're already working with. We talked about this earlier briefly. Providers are really trying to be very flexible, especially mental health providers, around telephone and telemedicine type visits, which works well for mental health. I was a non-believer for a while, but I've done it and it works. And so, trust your gut. I mean, the worst thing that could happen would be you reach out and get some more direct guidance, and you're wrong. That wouldn't be the end of the world. It would be another opportunity to learn and to be with and to keep taking steps forward.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear the positive experience that you've had as a practitioner with even something like phone. Obviously, we're not professionals, but even just the very sincere, I'm going to call my neighbor, I'm going to FaceTime the kid's grandparents. We could be concerned about too much screen time and the way that's going to have a negative impact on the child and the family, the parent consuming news in the family. But there's this other way in which all of the technology is such a blessing over 100 years ago with the Spanish influenza pandemic. It's going to allow us to connect and care for people in ways that are really, really important.
Yeah, and I think it's going to become more important as more people get sick, and unfortunately, that's probably going to happen. And I think our efforts are important to slow down the onset. Everyone's saying this, flatten the curve. That decreases the total number of people who have really bad outcomes from this. It also allows the healthcare system to be able to respond to those who are the most ill and not have to ration as much of what's available. And what I've heard people talk about is that the Spanish flu from 1918 is probably the best model to be thinking about. And there's this data that shows that Philadelphia did a poor job of starting, social distancing, and St. Louis did a really good job. And there's this, you can look at these curves, and Philadelphia is like this spike that goes straight up and down, and St. Louis is this curve that kind of goes up and down slower, and it's much lower than the spike, but it goes longer. And so it is really going to be a challenge, because 3 weeks is not going to be long enough. My colleagues are telling me it's probably 8 to 10 weeks at least that we're really pretty shut down. And it may be longer, because in other places what they've seen is they get over the hump and it goes down, and then it goes up again because people sort of gave in a little too early. And I think we're lucky that there's not like a super big holiday. I mean, 4th of July might be right around the time when we're past this, so hopefully we really will be past this by then. But these are the things that are hard, because I find myself at times becoming pretty emotional about these things, and then I think, well, what about people who don't have the training that I have?
Yeah.
But this is where, staying with and being present helps us to select how to use this information in workable ways. Because
Well,
these are pretty strongly held ideas about this. And it's going to be really important that we figure out how to use technology to continue to connect, how we do our social distancing, how we wash our hands and improve our hygiene, this sort of thing.
yeah, just reminds me for all of the questions and concerns we have in our homes with our spouse and our kids, we have those challenges. There are people right here in our Newman community around the country who are in true absolute isolation, the elderly person, the widow at home or in a nursing home. And so I'm really excited. As of today, we're trying to recruit the volunteers first to make sure we have that capacity to serve and meet the need. But Friar Tim announced on our website, uncnewman.org, you can volunteer in a number of ways. But one of them is really key, is just to be a phone buddy.
Wow,
so that once we have with you in place, then we can offer those in our parish who need somebody to talk to, they would have somebody to regularly check in. So I invite you guys to check that out today, or even with your supervision, if you have older teens, if you're going to be there to supervise them, you could invite them to participate in that way.
Well,
Johnny,
I think teams would be great at that.
I wanted to close if we could think about some family practices. I got a great text from a mom today, a Catholic family here at the parish. She said, you know what we've tried to do for a while, and we're just trying to be real intentional right now? We go around the dinner table and just talk about 3 positive things that happened today. And it really does 2 things for their family. It helps them to not be Pollyannish, but just to focus on seeing the good, being intentional to see the good. But also, it's just sparking really genuine, wonderful conversations among the whole family, help them get to know. But I wonder, what other families practices do you have? And maybe you guys in the comments want to share some of your family practices.
Yeah, we've been doing that off and on for a while. Our boys get in a fight who gets to go first, but we weather that, and then they interrupt us when we're trying to do ours, and we weather that. And so we've oscillated between that and just tell us anything about your day. And with teenagers, I can imagine like this is going to be a challenge. And so you give them a pass. This is not something to fight over. You can do it, whoever wants to do it does it, and then you see. And then if it's not moving anywhere, you might give the teenager some autonomy to decide, like, well, what do they think would be a way for us to maybe connect or do something that they think would be worthwhile. And again, they may say nothing, but you've put it out to them, and you'll see if they come around. One thing I remember about being a teenager, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but it's getting longer ago, is I was teenagers are into justice, right? Like they're very like interested in equity and what's right and what's wrong. And so you can use that to your benefit in this regard, and you might sort of help them to get active in a way that again is safe, right? And that maybe is not something that's going to happen around the table, but it could be. I mean, you could sort of let them help you talk about ways to do what's right in this really difficult situation, and maybe that's the way you talk about it.
Yeah, just a reminder, just like there's not going to be one solution for society to fight this isolation, like in our home and with our kids, there's not going to be one. So I do some things at the dinner table. I do some things in the family room or at the bedside when we gather intentionally for morning and evening prayer, just really simple routines. Just to thank God for blessings and pray in Our Father, or to ask God for help for what's before that day and pray in Our Father. That could be really helpful. But it's also just simple things. One of our moms here talked about slowing down, finding some time to slow down and enjoy and go for a walk. Like even starting new or reviving old traditions, like a walk or a bike ride around the block. That's a spiritual thing. We don't need to think that like it's about like what are we praying together, or we're talking about our thoughts and emotions. Like those things that feed our family connection, our family communion, are deeply spiritual and our emotional and psychological health too. So maybe it's going for a hike, going for a bike ride, reading a book, or even watching a movie. Screen time's not evil. We can laugh together. that would be a beautiful thing. So.
Yep, I agree.
Well, I want to share, above all, I want to thank you and thank our parents who participated, share some questions here in the sidebar, and you just for sharing your wisdom and experience. It's such a blessing to us, and I know this is going to be a journey we're on, a process we're going through for the next few months here.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I'm available to anyone. Share my email address, Matt, if you want. And I can't promise that I will be able to respond immediately or even the same day, but I'm happy to give advice and that sort of thing if it gets to that level. I hope it doesn't, but if it does, it's good to have like a mechanic in the family and a lawyer and a doctor, and sometimes it's good to know a psychiatrist, even though you don't really want to be hanging out with us too much. So.
You know, before we end, I just talked to a mother last night whose
Sure.
teenager she discovered has been cutting. So
Yeah.
we're talking about our ordinary families with typical struggles, but what about those among us who've already been carrying a big burden, and now all this stress and anxiety is a real trigger for them? How do we love those people in our midst?
It's challenging. What's coming to mind for me is supporting their capacity to practice the skills they already have, or seek more of the skills that they've been working on, and to try to help them find that spot within them that is actually there. That's hard to do when someone's hurting themselves, to not react in a way that is what we think as nurturing, but can be somewhat invalidating at a level. And so generally the idea is to accept that it's occurred, try not to overreact, try to help them to see, okay, so what has been going on? And most of the time, people will start with nothing, or it's just it's not something I want to talk about, and that's okay. But if you're able to stay present and support this person, and show them that you believe that they're just like anyone else and have this capacity, you might be able to start to say, so what do you remember from yesterday? What'd you have for breakfast? And then you find out, oh, they are able to recall they had a tough conversation, or and it's almost always some sort of interpersonal interaction, or some sort of reminder of a disappointment that leads to this sort of really desperate state. Self-harm that is short of potentially putting in danger of death is concerning. It's also something, though, that is a way that they're coping.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that focuses the pain, and then they get to see it sort of fade. And that's actually kind of reassuring. And so the notion that it's just all bad is not actually true. It's actually better than what worse things could be. But the idea is it's a place to start to talk about this, and obviously lean on therapists. If this is happening a lot, there's a certain type of psychotherapy. It's called dialectical behavior therapy. It's the sort of the gold standard. It uses what we're talking about generally is called a behavioral chain analysis. You help the person get better at starting to notice these things as they're ramping up. And then it's hard for a parent to do this, but over time, the therapist is more like a coach. It helps the person to see, like, what we're developing here is wisdom. What we're helping you to develop is wisdom. You want to be able to lead yourself, and most people have ambitions that they maybe are afraid or doubt that they can attain. And what you're learning here is this capacity to be with these challenges, and then it becomes more of a hopeful message, because you're learning a skill set that applies across all contexts. So there's a lot of expertise around this, and if someone's struggling with this and they haven't sought much help, that's the most important thing, because it actually can really get better. I won't say like quickly, but more quickly than you think. Radical change can happen in brief ways much of the time. There'll be setbacks, but they will be things that can be talked about and worked with.
And the same is true of all of us and all of our families and all that we're going through. We as human beings, but especially the power of God. God can do great things. I want to share a poem to close, but it reminds me, which might seem odd at first, it reminds me a lot of the prophets in ancient Israel. You know, the prophets were always there, but around the time that the Israelites were taken off into captivity in Babylon, right before and right after, a new type of prophet arose that began to kind of give us all of these dreams and visions, Amos and Hosea and parts of Isaiah, of what the world would be like if God was really all in all, or in the language of their time, like if God were our king, if we weren't suffering under this ruler or that ruler, if God were king, if God were all in all in every heart, home, and nation, what would life be like? What would the universe be like? And they're asking that question in what for them was the darkest moment in the history of their people. And this is a serious moment, but it's not the darkest moment. But maybe in the same way, we could ask ourselves, how might something come out of this? And this is a beautiful poem by Kitty O'Meara that maybe some of y'all have seen online. And the people stayed home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and were still and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows, and the people began to think differently, and the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed. Let us pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good and gracious God, author of life, we thank you for the gift of your light and life, the gift of your love that you share with each of us. We thank you for our children, our spouses, our neighbors, our co-workers, for all people everywhere. God, we ask you to be with those who have already experienced difficult times, even death. We ask you to comfort them. We ask you to bring healing to the sick. We ask you to strengthen and inspire and guide those who are searching for cures and treatments and laboring every day to take care of us. God, we pray for wisdom and humility and clarity and courage for those who have to make decisions on behalf of nations or their families. We thank you for the gifts from people like Johnny and other professionals among us, whose gifts we rely on now and even more in the days ahead. We pray that you would give them rest and renewal. And in the same way, we pray for Pope Francis, for Bishop Luis Raphael, and for Friar Tim. We pray that you would help and guide them as a shepherd among us. Together as a family, we dare to say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day
Our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Amen.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you so much for being with us. I hope you all have a great night.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
This conference will now be recorded. This conference will